everybody. Welcome to the InPsight Show. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall too everywhere. Guys, welcome to my first podcast in the brand new studio. Thank you, everybody, for being so incredibly patient. We appreciate it so much. I appreciate it so much. And it's just been, putting a whole studio together is quite something. So this was quite an endeavor and took a little longer than I thought it would, but here we go. So we're just going to do 2 back-to-back podcasts, get them up for you. I apologize. There was no Halloween podcast this year. I know, right? I honestly thought the studio would be done by then, and it wasn't. So, that's the way life rolls sometimes. But anyway, guys, we're here now, and oh my goodness, it is the end of November, and geez, you think some stuff happened this month? Oh my God. Wow. Well, we got half the country who's super excited that Trump is president again. We've got half the country who is completely freaking out that Trump is president again. And we're going to touch on some of this today. We're also going to touch on what does this mean? We're going to touch on what's gone down with the Pluto and Aquarius function. We're going to touch on a lot of stuff here today. So I'm going to just dive right into it. And we're going to start with the election. I've had so many people asking me, Danielle, do you think he cheated? Do you know what happened? Blah, blah, blah. You and every single other psychic that I've ever looked at and follow said that Harris was going to win and blah, blah, blah. You guys, this is what's tough because what we're going to start with today is we're going to work backwards into that question, okay? And what we're going to start with is how immensely divided this country has ended up being. And we didn't get here overnight, you guys. I know I talk a lot about this on the podcast, but I've got to kind of recap just a little bit here. This goes all the way back to the 80s, you guys. This goes back to the 80s when the Republican Party reached out to Ronald Reagan and reached out to the evangelical group and said, we're going to combine religion with the Republican Party and the Party of God and Country. So it started way back then, and then we go to where we are now. And quite honestly, you guys, this has been a long time coming towards this. And I've talked extensively since 2016 about all the different kinds of agendas that have been working toward the rollback of Roe versus Wade since it happened, in the 70s. And this has been an ongoing holy war or holy mission, if you will, for the folks who've been fighting it for a really long time, you guys. So for those of us born in 1969, and we were born into this incredibly progressive United States for the time, because for anybody listening out there who wants to hack on the boomers, I would like to remind everybody that it was the boomers who got the Equal Rights Amendment passed, and it was the boomers who got out there and had equal rights for women and lobbied so that Black and white people could get married. All of these things came about during the boomer generation. So what I think is so interesting is when people are like, oh, the boomers, they suck. I'm like, you guys, they did a lot more than you're giving them credit for here. Come on now. So as we speed up to where we are now, especially in 2016, we've had such an opportunity for misinformation and disinformation to take hold. We've got Russia and China out there just doing what they can to destabilize the United States because we affect so many things on the planet, you guys. We affect commerce, we affect media, we affect the balance of power in so many ways. Our military is all over the place. So if we're not paying attention anymore and we're too busy infighting, that kind of frees up some other countries with more nefarious agendas to do what they need to do. And we all know that, right? So when we look at how did this happen, did Trump cheat? What happened? You guys, there's a few parts here, and it first starts with all this disinformation that started way, way back in 2016. And when Trump lost in 2020, gang, let's not forget that he immediately went to, this election was stolen from me. Now, Trump knew, good gosh darn and well, that he did not win that election. He was coached by Putin. And this is all stuff that I've seen in the psychic ethers, you guys. So if you're like, I would like you to cite your sources. Well, it's the angel that walks with the world. So there you go. But I saw that he was coached, not just by Putin, but other world leaders, mostly by Putin, to say that the election was stolen. Now, of course, that triggered a bunch of lawsuits, and that triggered people having question marks over their head about the election system that were his base. Well, of course, all these lawsuits went through, and of course, there was nothing wrong with the voting, and of course, they showed that nothing was wrong in any of these states. So unequivocally, all of these courts came back and said, hey, guess what? Our election is airtight. There's not any way at all that anybody could cheat and get away with, winning. So now, even if they did find that somehow, whatever, Elon Musk was able to get in there and update some software or whatever, what are you going to do about it? Because now you've laid the groundwork for 4 years of people basically being election deniers and the left making fun of the election deniers and being like, you guys, how many lawsuits have proven that our elections are free and fair? So that was kind of genius on the part of Putin to make all this squawking and get all this proof that our elections are free and fair, and then turn around and wink, wink, if, wink, wink, something was pulled, then of course, what are you going to be, the election denier, after you are the party that turned around and told everybody that the elections are free and fair? Because that, everybody, is called a psyop. Now, I learned this term from, initially I saw the term psyop from a friend of mine who, unfortunately, we're not in that much contact anymore. This friend of mine really got sucked into the QAnon universe. And actually, it's really sad. This person kind of quit talking to everybody in their life. And last I even heard about this individual, they are divorced or getting a divorce from their spouse. Their spouse couldn't even deal with them anymore. And that is just so sad that people get sucked down into these rabbit holes of conspiracy and go a little crazy in there. However, the first time I heard the word psyop was from my QAnon friend. And I mean, to be perfectly straight up with you, I made fun of my QAnon friend. I was like, oh yes, psyops. The secret angry brother of Cyclops, who instead of having one eyeball has one big brain and makes everybody think the same. And I was kind of a jackass, to be honest with you. And I dismissed it. And I have another friend whose dad works in intelligence. And I was joking around one day, and this was maybe 6 months ago or so. It was fairly recently, actually. And I was joking around, and my friend, I was making fun of the psyops, cyclops thing, and my friend just kind of listened and said, so I take it you don't believe a psyop is real? And I said, God, no. Listen to that thing. A psyop, PSY-ops. Okay, a psyop. I'm like, that sounds like something out of a bad James Bond movie or, Mission Impossible or something. This is so hokey. Well, my friend proceeds to fill me in on the fact that the term psyop came from the CIA and it was actually a thing. Okay, so I'm just like, are you kidding me? So my friend informs me that, yes, this is a way of psychologically twisting people sideways. And it was something that the United States did with the Contras back in the 80s and blah, 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 and gave me this big fill-in. And I won't burn up your time with that. But I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like a psyop is a real thing. Oh my God. Okay. So if we take that knowledge that there is a psychological chess that is played at the level of the KGB or the CIA or any other country's top intelligence agencies, all right? And we look at these intelligence agencies and we think, God, they're all playing everybody like chess. Then you can kind of understand a little more how some folks got sucked down into the really deep rabbit holes. Some of that was just so unbelievable. But hey, you know what? My friend was explaining to me that her dad, when he worked in intelligence, would tell her, and she told me, that every single thing that the CIA did was like on a 10-year arc. And sometimes they were on a 5-year arc. But the point was to plant like an entire crop of doubt and just let it grow over time and let it become the passed around truth, even though it was not real. I mean, it was this whole, it's not funny, it's horrible. But I started thinking about it and I thought, well, my God, how brilliant. Lose an election, absolutely know you're going to lose it. Claim that, oh my God, I lost this election. No, I didn't. I was stolen from me, fully knowing you lost it, fully knowing that every court is not going to be able to prove any sort of election fraud. That kind of leaves you wide open to do whatever you want at that point, because what are you going to do? Have the people who said our elections are free and fair now saying you cheated? I mean, I was like, wow, okay. So I'm just going to leave that right at your doorstep. Okay, you can go ahead and make your own, 1 and 1 equals whatever you think it's going to make. I would also like to point out that during this election, you guys, we also had an enormous amount of racism that came forward. We have blue collar men in the Rust Belt states, in the swing states up there in Detroit and those areas that still don't want to vote for a woman. Just because guys are Democrats, some of these guys, they're kind of the Archie Bunker Democrats. They don't, except I don't think Archie Bunker was a Democrat, but that Archie Bunker type, the character of Archie Bunker, if you don't know who I'm talking about, he was a character in the 1970s created by Norman Lear, played by the wonderful actor Carroll O'Connor, who, by the way, as a side note, graduated from University of Montana in Missoula. He was a Montanan. So he knew about old grumpy, weird white men that didn't believe in anything but what they believed in. And he portrayed this guy who was a blue-collar guy living back east. And he was very grumpy and was very racist and sexist and all the things. It was a hilarious show, way ahead of its time. So when we look at this now, we think, okay, here's the Democratic Party with people in it who are still heavily sexist. However, as they've been counting these votes, you guys, we're now like, 1.2 million votes off between Harris and Trump. So it's not exactly a mandate. It's hardly a mandate. As a matter of fact, it's super duper close. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, nobody's going to claim cheating. Nobody's going to claim a recount that I'm seeing in the ethers so far. The Democrats are just kind of going to roll with this. However, what's interesting here is that, if you look at the number of bomb threats that were called in during this election from Russia, and there was, 86 or 90 or something ridiculous, a lot of them. And a lot of those bomb threats were called in major metropolitan areas, in Democratic areas. So they, of course, would have to evacuate if a bomb threat was called in. And, who knows what could happen? Who knows what hard disk or flash drive updates could be done on any election machine. Now, the election counting machines, that's, I think, where if there were going to be some shenanigans, and I'm just going to say, if there were going to be any, it certainly wouldn't be with the vote, like the automatic. It wouldn't be with the machines that actually people vote upon. It would be with the machines that count the paper ballots, because after there were so many weird wiggles with a lot of the ballots that were counted in 2016. And I don't know if you guys remember, whether you're a Trump supporter or a Clinton supporter, this is just news. I don't know if you remember back in 2016 that a number of mainstream networks back then in Florida, Ohio, some of the Rust Belt states were reporting that people were coming out of the voting booth and saying that they voted for Hillary Clinton. And then the screen flashed for a nanosecond and they saw their little oval was by Trump. And then it kind of said, thank you for voting. Your vote's been recorded. So there were a number of people who came out of those booths and said, yeah, my machine flickered and it looked like it was Donald Trump for a second. Well, in those states where this was documented on the news, Donald Trump won in those states exactly 2% over the exit polls. And that story was kind of dropped like a hot potato. And I think it was because back then we really didn't want to be like, oh, geez, there's might be something wrong with our elections. We thought, well, that was bizarre. Well, then COVID happened, you guys. And so everybody during COVID, that was the 2020 election, right? Everybody got mail-in ballots. Do you remember that? So nobody was, in long voting lines pressing any sort of ballot that was digital. It was all paper ballots. And all those paper ballots were being counted by machines. Okay. So there were a lot of states that I believe they even got federal dollars to update their voting machine, not necessarily the voting machines, but the vote tallying machines. I believe that was something that came with COVID because a lot of states all of a sudden had to come up with all this money to deal with paper ballots. And a lot of states didn't have them. So, or they had them, but they didn't have them to the degree of everybody having what would be considered an absentee ballot. So if you think about this, if there was to be any wiggling of these votes, I don't think it would have been at all, my assessment of this anyway, it wouldn't have been anything that would have been in the vote casting machines where you cast your digital ballot. It would be in the machines that are tabulating the paper ballots. And, of course, I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying if you had a bomb threat and if you had somebody be able to walk around there with, say, even a flash drive and go to some of the vote counting machines and just recalibrate with that flash drive, maybe a piece of software that just told the machine that for every filled in Donald Trump vote, that was one count. For every randomly mix it up, for every 5 or 10 Harris votes, that's one count. I mean, you can tell those machines, you guys, how to count one vote. You can say 20 votes counts as one vote, So now I'm not saying that's what happened, but if something was going to happen, that would be where you could affect it. Okay, now you'd have to go in, you'd have to take a flash drive, you'd have to stick it in these machines, you'd have to update the counting system, you would feed all these ballots through, and all the ballots would get counted. Just how they were tabulated within the machine would be different. Then at the end of the day, gosh, you could just go around with your flash drive and stick it right in those machines, and you could say, goodness, you know what? We're just going to make sure that we're double checking these numbers and we're doing a backup download of the numbers that the machines counted, just so we have them on a flash drive as well. And this is after they got all of that data translated to hard drives. And the hard drives took that data and then they went ahead and, stuck it up on the servers, and that's what the AP read. I certainly do not believe that I think all of our poll workers on both sides of the aisle were working very hard to prevent fraud in this election. I think that's 1,000% true. I think everybody who showed up to those polls did a tremendous job. I just thought it was kind of interesting that when we had these bomb threats called in Democratic districts, that things were strange. Now, I am not saying that there was any cheating. I'm saying if there were cheating, that'd be a way to do it. These machines are not affected they're not Wi-Fi abled, guys. So as much as everybody wants to spread around this, oh my God, Elon Musk went around and, he beamed information and changed the votes from his satellite. Well, that's probably not true. And again, I'm not saying there was any cheating here. I'm simply saying if one was going to augment anything, wouldn't that be an interesting way to do it? Don't you think? The other thing to look at here, guys, is a very disaffected group of people that voted for Trump. And you guys have to remember that this dis and misinformation campaign has been nailing people since 2016. And people are a little desensitized by the whole damn thing. All right? They're a little bit overwhelmed by the whole dang thing. And so the other components of this, if we take cheating right off the table there and just say America voted, the other portion of this is that the Democratic Party really needs to look at its tactics. And, I've talked with you guys about this so many times. I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to different layers of the Democratic Party and tried to have a conversation about consciousness with everybody. And, that never ever has been responded to. And of course, why would they? I'm just Jane Doe. They don't know me from Eve. I'm some psychic. I mean, why do they care about me? Nobody would care in that field, right? About me. However, I could tell that the messaging was not really going in a direction that would include everybody. And that gets hard, guys. You can't really have, that can't be a thing, because what you end up with in that case is you end up with, quite a bit of disenfranchised people. What am I talking about? Well, on the eve of the election, Joe Rogan, who is a talk show host, who can be kind of inflammatory and very masculine bravado kind of dude, he came on, and then the eve of the election, after saying that there was no way that he would personally vote for Donald Trump after interviewing him, he came out and he actually said he was going to vote for Harris. Okay? The eve of the election that evening, Joe Rogan came out and said he's changed his vote to Donald Trump, and he encouraged all of the guys out there to get out there and vote for Donald Trump. Well, of course, what that did was inspire a lot of younger men, a lot of younger white men, to go out and stand in line and vote for Trump because Joe Rogan told them to. Now, I've got a lot of people going, but haven't they been paying attention? Don't they know what that's going to do to their girlfriends? No! These young men would not be paying attention because you've got a party over here in the Democratic Party that's talking about women and how important women are, and talking about minorities and how important people of color are, and how important LGBTQ people are, how important the trans community is. And at the same time saying white men are the problem. White men are the problem. White privilege, white power. Now, guys, I think we can all agree that humans who happen to be Caucasian and happen to have a penis have had a slightly different set of rules for a very long time in this country than everybody else. However, if you were a political party and you just keep hitting white men suck, and that's kind of what the Democrats were doing, not overtly, because Joe Biden's a white man, hello, but Joe Biden also won in those Rust Belt states, you guys. He's a white man. So he was winning Michigan, and he's winning Wisconsin, and he's winning Pennsylvania. So there is that element, guys. So if you've got younger white men, and not all young white men, obviously, but there was a tremendous number of young white men who turned out for Trump. And they turned out the day of that. That's one of the reasons why the lines were so incredibly long. The other reason was people turning out to vote for Harris. Those lines were incredibly long. And also what was going on is, say the polls close at 8 o'clock and you are in an incredibly long line, and you look down and you see 8 o'clock hits and you think, oh my God, I'm still an hour and a half from getting in. You turn around and you leave. Well, there were also people walking up and down those lines telling people, oops, the polls closed. I guess you missed your chance. If you didn't know that if you had gotten in line by 8 o'clock, you still were going to be able to get in and vote, you would go home. So there were actually people walking up and down those lines going up, sorry, you missed your chance to vote. Polls are closed. The line was too long. They didn't realize they still got a shot. So what was going on is that the AP was declaring for Trump well before some of these lines had even received all the people. Now, the way they do that, you guys, because it's an electoral college issue, they go down and they look at ballots. They look at registered voters. And they say, I'm just using this as an example, 100 registered voters are in a county. And if 60 of those registered voters have already come through and say they all voted for Harris, and there's only 40 more registered voters, they're going to call that county for Harris because 60 is greater than 40. So that's how they end up doing that math. And it's predicated upon the number of ballots that you have. So that's kind of how that happens, or not ballots, but registered voters. Okay. Now that's assuming every registered voter gets out there and votes, and not all of them do. As a matter of fact, this is what's weird, is there were epic lines. And again, we're seeing a lot of votes come in for Trump through those epic lines. Traditionally, a lot of Democratic voters vote ahead of time through the mail. So let's just pretend, for the sake of discussion, if there was any wiggling of how votes are tabulated through a software update in swing states with a hard drive or a flash drive update, then a lot of the Democratic votes wouldn't have necessarily been counted unless that update happened on election day, in which case paper ballots were going to be tabulated differently. Of course, I'm not saying that happened, mind you. However, I think as we turn the page on that, what ended up happening here is that there were a lot of disaffected young white male voters who came out and voted. Also, a lot of people who had voted for Biden who just weren't paying attention and blame Biden for prices of things instead of corporations, blame Biden for gas prices instead of OPEC. And, we as Americans were so overwhelmed. Again, this goes back to the psyops. One way to get people to tune out is to overwhelm them. So we had been hit and overwhelmed by a bunch of garbage, especially going up into the election. Just craziness. I'm not necessarily saying, that, of course, there was the usual amount of garbage that people start dishing during an election cycle, all the really negative campaigning and all of that kind of stuff. But there was also a tremendous amount of inundating people with just garbage and crap, so people would tune out. It became like having your head in a beehive. According to my friend whose dad who works in intelligence, that's a psyops tactic to get people to tune out, So there was a lot of people who believe that Biden was at fault for the economy, even though it was the strongest economy. The funniest thing, you guys, so I've got like a piddly little amount of stocks, right? I poop around on Robinhood and I have my little stocks I have. And my stocks dropped $1,000, guys, the minute Trump got elected. And they have never been up to where they were when previous to this. Now, Biden is still the president. However, with Trump bringing on all these very interesting people, or trying to, into his cabinet, and the promises that they're making, like Elon Musk, promising he's going to cut everything under the sun, in his Doge, God, you guys can't make this up. You can't make this up. His Doge Department of Government Efficiency, Doge. I mean, come on. Can you have any sort of, it's just, I'm going to pause my evaluation of all this with one comment here. If you haven't seen the movie Idiocracy, you absolutely, positively have to see it. You have to see it. It was made in 2006. And Luke Wilson is in it. And it's absolutely hysterical and heartbreaking, because I remember watching it. I think it was back in 2011 or something. And I was at a very, very dear friend's house and we watched it. And she thought it was hysterical. I thought it was hysterical. My wife and her husband were so pissed. They did not think it was hysterical. They thought it was awful. And they didn't like it at all. It hit way too close to home for them, which it does, especially in this time frame. If you haven't watched it, please watch it, because it's exactly what's going on right now. It's kind of a little predictive piece back in 2006, but what a gem. I just have to tell you. So anyway, back to where we are in our timelines. So all this goes down with the election, and we're showing, this huge amount of people who came out for Trump. And I do believe a great amount of people came out for Trump at the last minute. And I think Joe Rogan had a lot to do with that. And yes, we have, the left has Taylor Swift and all the things. But this was kind of a perfect storm of being able to pull off an election for Trump. For all the aforementioned reasons. Of course, I'm not saying there was cheating, but if there was. So if you factor in all of that, guys, this is a really interesting way to walk this person in 2024. Now, what does that mean for the country? I would really caution everybody from just pounding the panic button here. And I'll give you some really big reasons why. Now, if you're a Trump voter and you're listening to this podcast, you're like, shut up, lady. Thank God he got in. Our country was down the tubes. It was terrible, blah. I too, I think we all know I probably didn't vote for Donald Trump. And I will tell you that as somebody who is married to a woman and reading Project 2025 and hoping that is not going to get acted upon. I'm hoping it doesn't. It was really kind of a tough pill to swallow that people would vote for Trump and just to save 25 cents on gas or 50 cents on a dozen eggs at the expense of my right to be married, And I couldn't believe it that my right to be married was worth a quarter to somebody? Really? A quarter a gallon? Man, God, if the roles were reversed, I would never put anyone else's marriage rights up for a potential turn back to the states. I just wouldn't do it. But if you've never had your rights threatened, you guys, you just don't think like that. You don't think about that. Or you think, oh, that could never happen. Or you could think, oh, well, who cares? They're going to have to live with that. That's a special need anyway. That's a special desire to be married. Actually, it's not really the government's job, you guys, to tell consenting adults who to marry. You can't tell two consenting adults who to marry. That's not the government's job. So it's not even, I suppose a state can recognize this or that, but it's really not the state's job either. Honestly. So I had to get through being kind of really blown away that there are Americans out there that to save 25 cents a gallon on gas would throw people's rights out. And I was talking to a friend of mine. I have several friends who are Trump voters. And I asked, and these are really kind people. And, I'm not from the camp of people who say, well, you can't be kind and vote for Trump. We're going to get into that in a minute. But I was just like, guys, how could you do this? Have you not read Project 2025? You know what they say to me, guys? They say, oh, that's not real. That's not real. And I'm like, you guys, it is real. They're like, no. That was just that was made so much more worse by the left. That's not real. I'm like, yeah, you guys, it is real. And it wasn't written by the left. It was written by the Heritage Foundation, which is a Christian organization, a right-wing Christian organization. And they'll say, no, you bought into all the mainstream media. You're buying into legacy media. You're brainwashed. That's not real. Trump's not going to touch that with the 10-foot pole. He already said he's not involved. And I said, you guys, it was actually on his website. I saw it on his website before he caught heat on it and they took it down. And they said, no, it wasn't. It was never on his website. I said, well, but it was. So what we're up against here is a group of people that want to cherry pick what Trump is all about. And they basically dismissed my concern about Project 2025. They said I was being histrionic. Honest to God, I hope I am, you guys. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm so wrong I can get on Facebook and Instagram and get up on Blue Sky, and I still have my account up on Twitter, even though I'm not X, whatever, even though I'm not active there really, but I don't want anybody pretending to be me. So I just parked that account and it's just sitting there doing nothing. But, folks want to cherry pick what Trump is about. Why? Because they've been inundated. Psyops, the evil cousin of Mr. Cyclops, okay? People have been inundated by so much garbage, they start to tune out what they don't want to hear. And according to my friend whose dad was in intelligence, that's part of the psyops effect, is people just start creating their own reality and living in it. So here I'm trying to tell my Trump voting friends, guys, but this is a real thing. Project 2025 is a real thing. And they're looking at me going, Danielle, you got to calm down. Remember when you told us that the QAnoners were crazy? You sound like a crazy QAnoner. This isn't real. So that's the perspective of many of these Trump voters. Now, I know a lot of my lefty friends are pretty adamantly against using that as an excuse. Ignorance is no excuse of the law. So ignorance of Project 2025 is no excuse to vote for Trump. However, gang, again, this whole entire election points to the Pluto and Aquarius, the Aquarian time frame, which is all about breaking apart our illusions. So we've got a big section of the left that's laboring under this illusion that everybody should educate themselves rationally and fairly, except for the fact that when you try to talk to that group on the left about the fact that certain Trump voters just absolutely don't believe that Project 2025 is real, and you give them all the reasons why, instead of being like, wow, that's heavy. How can we affect that change? They come back with the same dogmatic belief of, well, that couldn't be possible. That ignorance is no excuse. Okay, but see, that's hypocritical because you see what I'm saying? It's like this never-ending cycle of do as I say, not as I do. So the bottom line is, guys, if I'm listening to a news source and all it does is tell me that Project 2025 isn't real, they're debunking the heck out of it, they're saying it's a creation of the left, and that is my information stream. That's what I'm going to believe. And if that information stream is also telling me, hey, don't listen to legacy media because they're all owned by the deep state, then I'm not going to do that. And if I've been doing this for 8 years, hello? So again, I have a lot of lefty friends who are like, that's no excuse, it's no excuse, it's no excuse. But it kind of is an excuse because I don't know many people out there. If Donald Trump were to do a 180 right now, let's just say he was, and he comes out there and he starts supporting the trans community and whatever, are we really going to come out of the closet and support Donald Trump as a gay community? Or are we going to dig in and say, I don't trust you, I don't think this is real? Even if he was supporting the trans community, which he's not. But you see what I'm saying, guys? I mean, we are in the Aquarian time frame. And Aquarius in Pluto means that we have to look at our own shadows. And Aquarius is the we sign, we, okay? And it came out of Capricorn. And Capricorn is very much the me sign. What is my money doing? What is my business doing? What are my contracts doing? It's all about tiny details that have to do with personal movement forward. And then you've got Aquarius, which is all about the we and the, I will suffer a little for the goodness of the we. And what's going on right now is that we are all being asked to look at the we. And we're being asked to look at our own biases, our own hypocrisies, all of it. The whole entire thing. And what I think is so fascinating about that is that it's hard. It's so easy to say peace, love, and harmony and all these things. That's so easy to do until it's actually time to look at what part of each one of us wants to hang on to demonizing something, because that's what we're trained to do in America, guys. We are. We are pitted in us against them, from the Super Bowl to our high school sports teams to our politics. I mean, think about how hard it is. in so many states to vote if you're an independent. That is really hard. I was talking to a really good friend of mine who lives in Idaho, and we were chit-chatting through text and Facebook, and my friend was typically votes independent, and when my friend was trying to vote independent in Montana, well, you can't vote in a primary if you're voting independent in Montana. They won't let you. You can only vote as a Republican or a Democrat in a primary. You can vote in the general election as an independent. And my friend was telling me that in Idaho, it makes it then again even more impossible to vote as an independent, even in the general election. And I was like, geez, are you kidding me? And my friend explained why, and I can't exactly explain it verbatim. It was quite complicated, but that's the point, is to divide you down into two parties. And they don't want people out there independently thinking. So, it really, there's so much going on right now. And it to a degree, yes, it matters who's in the presidency, you guys. Yet to a degree, it also matters how we behave as Americans to one another. Because if we're all going to go crazy and hate everybody who voted for Trump and just hate, now we're becoming the same ethos as what many lefties couldn't stand about the MAGA people. They're hateful. They hate black people. They hate, this, they hate that. And it's marginalizing a group, saying every Trump voter is a racist. Every Trump voter is this, is that. Now, you guys, I'm saying this stuff, and this is coming from a gay woman who is still working on the inside of me about how to work through the feelings that people would just pick and choose what they wanted about Trump and threw out Project 2025. And can I just say it one more time? My rights were equal 25 cents off a gas, 25 cents, a quarter. My ability to marry my wife is worth a quarter to people. Shit, I'll give you a quarter. Quit voting for that. Come on. So, but hey, there's a lot more to it than that. And I can make it about my most base level hurt. I can make it all about that. And it doesn't make my feelings any less invalid. It doesn't make them invalid. I have valid feelings. However, it would be negligent, especially as Pluto moves into Aquarius, to not have a bigger picture lens on how the hell we got here in the first place. You guys, I mean, this is a big deal how we got here. This isn't just some little accidental slide and, people got capricious. They did get capricious at the last minute. A lot of that happened. A lot of young men who don't follow politics at all, except date maybe progressive girls, and those girls are talking about how white guys suck. Then Joe Rogan says, no, you don't. You're awesome. Trump is saying to young men, you know what? You have a place in America. You are strong. You are brilliant. They don't want you. I want you. You know who else did that, guys? Adolf Hitler. He also appealed to young disenfranchised men and white men, young white men also. So, it's I could go all day about the Trump and the this and the that and the psyops and blah. But now we've got this guy who was, for all intents and purposes, elected as the next president of the United States. So what does that mean for America? Well, Trump is sort of like the Wizard of Oz. He's kind of like the projection of the wizard. Do you remember that movie from back in the day? And the wizard was this big projection up in space, and it was super spooky. And then Toto went around and found this little man behind the curtain. And, here the guy says, don't pay any attention to the little man behind the curtain. And everybody figured out that was actually the wizard, was a little guy who got stranded there on a hot air balloon. So if we look at how this is flowing here, Trump is like the Wizard of Oz. He's the projection. There's a lot of other little men behind the curtain that are doing all these little things here. I'm actually kind of excited to see how the Trump Elon Musk thing plays out, because that's all fun and games until Elon decides Trump needs to do something a certain way, and Trump decides that Elon needs to do something a certain way, and Trump will just kick his butt right on out. There's a lot of people coming forward right now saying that Elon Musk is on the spectrum, that he may have a form of autism and all these different things. And that may be so. There are good friends of Elon Musk who have come forward and said, listen, Elon really, really does want to change the world. He just wants to change it the way he thinks it should be changed. So, if that means spending billions of dollars on rockets, that's what he's going to do. If he's going to go in there in the Doge department, what a shameless plug for crypto that you own. But anyway, for the Doge department, if he's just going to go in there, and he's saying he's going to gut all of these different government offices and government programs. And he's saying that there's going to be a period of hardship for everybody, but it's what's necessary for the country to stabilize. Okay. Well, that's all fine that he wants to cut all these things. However, we still do have a government. We still do have people who are not Trump loyalists or part of the little man behind the curtain pulling the levers so the big Trump smokescreen can say and do what it's going to do. There are many, many people in this nation who are just kind of normal, everyday people who aren't part of who aren't the first cousin of the evil Cyclops, the psyops, who aren't part of any of that. And they just want to govern, and they just want to try to get things back to the center. And I was talking at the end, guys, of 2023 into 2024 about how extremism was going to be out, and it really is out. And we see that in how close this election is. And we are also seeing it in Trump wants to just go and, whitelist all these appointees in his cabinet. And of course, that's not happening. He wanted Matt Gaetz in there. Is it Getz or Gates? I'm going to say Gates. I don't pay much attention to that gentleman. But Matt Gaetz withdrew from the vetting process because he knew the second he got in there, they were going to find all of this incredible dirt on him, and he would rather not. Okay? So he went ahead and withdrew. And I think Dr. Oz is the head of Medicaid or something weird like that. And Dr. Oz, I know doctors, you guys, who are horrified by Dr. Oz. So it's kind of like, you guys have to see Idiocracy. Please promise me you'll watch it if you haven't. And if you've watched it, will you please watch it again? Because at least it'll give you a good laugh. So Trump picked all of his favorite TV personalities, and they still have to get vetted, you guys. And I would really caution everybody from getting sucked into headline cycles. And I'm not bashing on legacy media or mainstream media. I am saying that, media has really, really, really leaned heavily on paying journalists who can create headlines that will get more clicks. So they're wanting journalists to create these click-heavy headlines. So everything sounds catastrophic. Everything sounds like a big deal. And that's what's been going on for a couple of years now, actually. So just be informed. Be informed. However, don't go crazy, okay? Because remember, Pluto is in Aquarius, and it's asking us to evaluate our own illusions, you guys. And if we really do believe that one person in the presidency is going to save the whole United States, we have missed the point of the fact that our governmental system in the United States is supposed to throw power from the top up, not the top down. Okay? We need to remember this, guys, going forward. There's a reason that 40 years ago, organizations like the Heritage Foundation and all of these other very, very religious and evangelical right-wing organizations started having great big families and started training each kid that they were going to have a role, and that role was in the name of God. Like this guy was going to be on the sheriff's department. This guy was going to be a judge. This girl was going to be on the school board. This girl was going to be a policeman. No kidding. And that's been going on for 40, 50 years now. Okay? So we've got sort of a, if you want to call it an army, but we've got a very, very widespread movement of people who have literally been raised to believe that this is their purpose from God, to get out there and fulfill their function out there. So if we are throwing power from the bottom up Think about this. Our school boards, our city councils, our county commissioners, our local legislatures, sending people, then we get to the National Congress, and we get to the Senate, and we get to the presidency. But think about how much of your community is run locally. How about all of it, guys? Do you think that Biden is coming to your local community, unless you're Flint, Michigan, and saying, hey, we're going to make these changes here? No, those are the local folks who are elected, guys. We are supposed to throw power in the United States in our civic system from the bottom up. And we've gotten, again, Pluto and Aquarius, got to look at our illusions, right? We've decided to get lazy, complacent, overwhelmed, thanks to the cousin of the Cyclops, the psyops. We are inundated so much, people want to tune out. They want to drop out. They don't want to participate in local government. They don't want to participate in their communities. They want someone else to do it, someone else to do it, someone else to do it. They want to go to the Bahamas. Someone else can do it because they're already overwhelmed. Well, guess who's stepping in to do it? All those folks who were raised for 40 years to be the judges and the mayors and the town councils and the county commissioners and the head of the sheriff's department and the police. They're doing it because they believe that it's their holy mission to God. So, gang, we need to be involved in shaping our local communities. This is the reality of Pluto in Aquarius. We can't just hope somebody's going to deal with it for us. Now, I understand that not everybody is cut out to be a county commissioner or a city council person or whatever. But for God's sakes, at least be aware of what's going on in your community. And if there's a bunch of wackos trying to do things that you really don't agree with, then run for something, or step up, or write letters to the editor, or attend those school board meetings and stand up and be visible. Don't be afraid, be visible, and stand up and say, I understand that it's your right to exercise your opinion there, but it is not your right as a school board to shape the material in the library that my child has the option of reading. That is my decision to edit these things for my children, not you. You are not the parent of my child. You do not have this right. But what's happening is so many good people never thought this would happen in the United States, right? And because most of us grew up in a very liberal United States, that this whole little local civic army has been being built to overthrow for 50 years, we have not developed the same habits. Many of us on the left, not everybody on the left. There's a lot of great people on the left who work for lots of things that are good for the whole country. There's lots of people who are kind of in the middle and independent that work across the aisles for everybody. And that's really where we need to get in order to poke the eye out of our cousin of the Cyclops, the psyops. If we're going to defeat the psyop, which depends on great polarization and cutting people out of our lives and never speaking to people again, it is heavily dependent on isolationism, okay, this psyop. And if we don't participate with that, it has no tread. It has no tread to grip the road of disinformation with. So what we're going to be seeing, you guys, through this time frame is a lot of our political figures kind of come into the middle to say, God, this has gotten really insane. There's going to be a lot of Republicans that are not going to just fall in line with Donald Trump, guys. They're not. And we're seeing that already. We're seeing that already the Senate did not pick Trump's Senate Majority Leader. They picked a Senate Majority Leader who has forged a lot more in the image of Mitch McConnell. Now, Mitch McConnell, I will tell you, we can credit for the use of the filibuster in its modern usage, and we can also credit the party line vote to Mitch McConnell. The all or nothing vote that we see with the Republicans, that lockstep, that was Mitch McConnell's doing. And I think he's probably regretting that right about now. But that was him. Back in the day before he became as powerful as he was in the Senate, people just voted. A lot of the Republicans would vote for just normal blue-collar Democrat ideas. This whole "you're for us" or "you're against us" started coming in with this George Bush Sr. and then George G.W. Bush. So you guys can see where these little bitty drops of all kinds of information have been put down. And this is how we got here. So, in the last few minutes of this particular segment of this podcast, I would tell you that, you got to do what you got to do, you guys. You got to be who you are. You've got to deal with your heart. You've got to vote your conscience. You've got to handle your life the way you want to handle it. For me personally, because I have a particular lens on all this stuff, and it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that mine is right and yours is wrong. We all need to execute our lenses right now and look through them and pay attention to them. However, I, because of my lens, because of all of these chess pieces I see that have made the soup that we're all stewing in right now, me just stopping talking to Trump voters for me is not an option. Because that's like cutting off the very tip of my pinky and saying, well, that'll stop me from grabbing a candy bar. No, it won't. I got another hand. I got 9 other fingers. And most of that finger over here, I can do whatever I want with that. So if I want to put my focus there and make a Trump voter or Trump the issue, I sure can, except for the fact that there's a billion other issues that need addressed. And I'll tell you this, you guys, we're going to have, 74 million and counting people who are going to be devastated when Trump is not able to keep all these promises he put out there. And then he can't even blame it on anybody because now we have a red majority in Congress. We have a red majority in the Senate. We have a red majority in the Supreme Court. So who's he going to blame it on? What's he going to do? Try to wrap it? If his plans don't work out, is he going to launch the balloon of, oh my God, the deep state's so big that you need to elect me again to see if we can get the deep state? Because look, they haven't been able to allow me to do anything. And will his people actually buy that a second time? Probably half of them would. But what I'm looking at in the future is a great heartbreak in this nation. And I'm just going to throw that out there. And maybe this is too soon. And, I'm to be clear, I never want to misrepresent myself. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I do not believe in his politics. I don't believe in his policies. And for me personally, he's kind of weird. For me, I didn't vote for him. However, now this is the guy we've got. I'm not going to start being his fan. However, I do understand what went into the defranchising of a lot of people who did vote for him. And I do understand that lazy American, it's not my problem. I think it's horrible, that apathy. But that's really what we need to be addressing, you guys. Not that somebody voted for Trump who knew very little about Trump, who knew very little about the quarter and the gas prices and my marriage rights. We need to address the autopilot and the apathy in this country. That's what Pluto and Aquarius is trying to get us to do. And we've got to address our inner apathy and our inner prejudices. Really. It's going to be a weird time. So I'm looking ahead and seeing 74 plus million people, at least 2/3 of them, wildly crushed when their gas prices don't come down, when they can't afford the health care, when all of the prices of their groceries escalate. Trump's going to blame it on everybody but him. We're all in, guys, for a little bit of a rocky 2-year period. And I kind of see why. I wish it wasn't true, and it's a bummer. But again, please don't throw bricks at the messenger, guys. We had all this time with Biden to learn to be a kinder, gentler America. And America didn't get the memo at all. And not only did we not get the memo, we got worse. And Pluto is over here, Aquarius is over here going, what's it going to take for you to get off autopilot? Now, there's a lot of voters that researched on the right and the left. There's a lot of Republicans who were not for Trump. There were a lot of brand new registered voters who were not for Trump. There were tons of people who showed up to this election who weren't for Trump. And ironically, he still emerged a winner. Isn't that interesting? So, what we're looking at here, though, is the people who did vote for Donald Trump. And there were a lot of them. A lot of them voted not even knowing what a tariff is. And we can't just keep saying ignorance is no excuse. Okay, fine. That's a great platitude. But what does that actually mean for our country? If we start writing off half the country, we have a civil war. And most of these folks don't even know what the hell they even put in office. That's the gut-wrenching part of it. And a lot of these folks knew exactly who they put into office, but cherry-picked who that person is. And some of those folks know exactly who he is through and through and love it about him. So we have a very unique place that we're in spiritually in our country. And that unique place is to come to, even if we are heavily disagreeing on how we progress forward, is to come to the balance point in the middle in order to say, how do we continue to build forward and reject this extremism? Because you guys remember, extremism is out. There is not an energy that's going to support the illusion of Trump in this time frame, you guys. There is not an energy that's going to support the illusion of Trump. There are going to be voters who support him. There's going to be fans who support him. That's different than the universal energies of Aquarius supporting the illusion. Are you following here? So, what's interesting is I think if we as Americans could have gotten the lesson of harmony, peace, love, all these things that Harris was talking about, I was such a fan of the message of all of that because I understand how that can heal things. However, there's a lot of people who don't even understand what peace, love, and harmony is, you guys. That's the problem in America. We can say Donald Trump is the problem, but no, what the problem is people don't even understand what peace is. They don't understand what love is. They don't understand what being given a balanced shot would look like. There's a lot of people in this country who heard all of that and thought, what a crock of crap that is. I don't have that opportunity. I'm not the former Attorney General of California. I can't just walk in and do that. I need cheaper gas. I need cheaper eggs. Trump. So I guess my challenge to you this podcast is if you voted for Trump, you're probably listening to this going, oh my God, shut up, move on, blah. But if you voted for Trump and you're thinking that right now, I will challenge you to say, guess what? Half of your country is freaked out and feeling like they're going to be attacked. And if you're a Trump voter and you don't believe that's true, you've got your head in the sand. Just as much as you think that the left has their head in the sand, buried in legacy media, if you don't acknowledge, for whatever reason, maybe if you're a Trump voter and maybe you believe that legacy media brainwashed half the country. Okay, let's just say for the sake of argument, that's not true. But let's just say that that's true. And you're a Trump voter and you're listening to me, you still have a responsibility to say, wow, even if you believe that all of that is garbage and half of us are idiots, there are still half of us that believe this. We believe what we believe. So the onus is on you, now that your guy won, to start to try to understand why half of the country would think what they do. And if you're a Trump voter and you're listening to this and you just write this off as, you know what? It's because you're brainwashed. You're crazy. Then you are going to miss this Pluto in Aquarius lesson, which is about busting illusions. And you're going to be delivered a very disappointing blow to the biggest illusion of all. And for those of us who didn't vote for Donald Trump, I would love it. I would love it if Project 2025 was just a vote getter for him and didn't mean anything in real life. I would be so pleased. Not pleased that it exists, not pleased that people think that, But in terms of having rights revoked, I would be very pleased if that were the case. We'll see. But considering that Donald Trump, God, he's just that hologram in the sky. He's a white sheet that can become anything that anybody projects on him. He's 78 years old, you guys. He's tired. His brain is starting to slip. He's always going somewhere with Joe Rogan and freaking Elon Musk. Oh my God, you guys. I saw this picture online. They went to like a world wrestle, like a WWE fight. Is that, you please see Idiocracy. Please, 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 please. Okay. So they go to this WWE fight to celebrate after, I don't know if it was after his, he was declared the winner or something. I don't remember. But there's this picture, and I think it's Elon Musk taking a selfie. So he's the closest one in the picture. It's him, and I think it's Joe Rogan on the other side. I'm not quite sure some bald guy is on the other side of Trump. Maybe it's not Joe Rogan. But Trump is in the middle, and his eyes are closed, and he looks like he's just passing out. And these two other guys in their 50s are smiling, and they're happy, and Trump just looks dead in the middle of these two guys, just this kind of corpsey looking dude. And it was really, like I said, I'm not necessarily a fan of Donald Trump, but it was really kind of sad that this guy is just getting drug around. And I mean, he's going for it, and he's doing it to stay out of prison that's why he ran again. But you guys, did you ever see Weekend at Bernie's? Okay. This picture he looked like Bernie. He looked like the dead guy in between the other two guys, and they probably tied their shoelaces together and stapled his toupee on and walked him into the place and sat him down. It literally looked like Weekend at Bernie's. And being a Gen Xer, of course, I have such a warped sense of humor, so I start laughing hilariously, and I'm like, oh my God. But I am a compassionate person, you guys, and I don't hate anybody. And I know that makes certain people mad out there. I have people who don't even tune into this podcast because I won't choose a side and hate people. Okay, rock on. But I'm not going to. I don't even hate Donald Trump. I see the role he plays. I wish we didn't have to go through that collectively as a human race, but we do. Because we won't get the picture until a bunch of people are knocked off of autopilot and watch this person they deeply believe in let them down. And we all have to go through that. And so I'm hoping the letdown is not as dramatic and heinous as it possibly could be. Super hoping that. I do believe if we look at Trump presidency point 1, and this is point 2, if we look at 1.0 rather, I've diminished his presidency down to tenths, point 1 and point 2. But if we look at 1.0, it was chaos. And this is still going to be chaos. And if Trump doesn't like somebody, he's going to kick him out, just like he did the first time. And if Elon Musk tries to step over the top of too much, Trump's going to kick him out because there can be only one. Trump is like the Highlanders, like the Kurgan. There can be only one, right? So he kills people around him, hypothetically speaking, of course. So, guys, I just want you to chew on this for a little while, and I know everybody's got their feelings about it, and I'm not asking you to go out and love Donald Trump and love the fact that all these rights were voted against and love the fact that people are going to get deported. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you today to do your best. That's all. That's all. You got to do you. You've got your own karmic lessons. You can tell me to F off, all the things. But I'm just asking you today to look at the great big picture of how the hell we got here. Look where Pluto in Aquarius is. Understand that Pluto is going to hop on top of all of our illusion and biases until they're broken wide open and we can see one another as human beings again and begin to build forward a country that truly does work for all people, guys. So try to stay out of the hysteria, okay? And I'm talking to my lefty friends. I've got lots of righty friends who are over the moon right now. They think old Trump's going to walk in there and put America back and make it great again. And, I do not see that economically. Again, I would absolutely love to be wrong if Donald Trump doesn't deport anybody and doesn't touch anybody's rights and just kicks some fiscal issues into place and fixes things without gutting our social programs. I would be very impressed. And I would be the first person to hop on a podcast and say, wow, am I impressed? I didn't think that would happen. Not particularly seeing that currently, but a girl can dream, guys. A girl can dream. Because we are a country of people with big ideas, big hearts, big minds. We're a little on autopilot. We're a little disaffected. We're a little lazy. We have people voting, not even understanding why, just because they want to save 5 cents. We have a lot going on that we need to address. So all I'm asking you to do today is just think about what I put forward and what these angels brought forward. And when you're ready, think about how you are going to create the positive United States as possible from the bottom up. Because the tail does not wag the dog in this country. We have given the tail far too much power. And we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, need to come together right now. Not over me, that's too much pressure, but, over your own heart. How's that? To sort of kind of barely quote the Beatles. All right, you guys, I love you all. And that is actually true. I love you all. And I hope you have a beautiful evening or day whenever you're listening. And I will see you next podcast.